Our next panel is a session on building reactors, fuel, and the workforce. And I'm delighted to invite the panelists and Lauren Hughes, who is Deputy Director of the Nuclear Energy Policy Initiative at the Atlantic Council, to please come up. Lauren, I'm so pleased to turn this over to you now to introduce your speakers and moderate the session.
Well, thank you, Jennifer, for the kind introduction. It's my privilege to serve as Jennifer's Deputy Director at the Nuclear Energy Policy Initiative at the Atlantic Council Global Energy Center for this fourth session. Thanks to all of you who are joining us in person and online to tackle building reactors, fuel, and the workforce. No tall order in 45 minutes, and I appreciate that this esteemed panel is willing to grapple with this challenge. Certainly distinct elements to think about, but also interrelated in terms of how they impact one another. I'm joined on the far end by Katie Aittola, the Senior Vice President of Enterprise Strategy and the Chief Risk Officer of Duke Energy. To her right is Seth Grae, the President and Chief Executive Officer of Lightbridge Corporation. To Seth's right is Rob Redditch, the Chief Business Development Officer of Synthos Green Energy. And then just to my left is Brian Smith, the Director of Nuclear Reactor Development at Idaho National Laboratory. So I'd love for let's start by having all of you provide us a little bit of an overview about what you do, where you sit, but tackle that first piece of this ask on building reactors, building the order book. So Katie, I'd like to start with you. Can you please tell us about Duke Energy? I wouldn't shy away from the contributions of the existing fleet, even though we're talking about building the new generation, and then your plan for what that new generation might look like.
Sure, sounds good.
Oh.
Okay. Good afternoon. Nice to meet everybody. As she said, I'm from Duke Energy. We currently have a 60 gigawatt fleet. Of that, 11 gigawatts is nuclear. So nuclear plays a huge role in our current day, and we look to see it continue to play a role. Well, not only our existing, there we go. That's kind of what I was waiting for, sorry. So that 11 gigawatts, we're in the process of relicensing all of those 11 gigawatts, and we are also looking to have new nuclear play a large part in our future generation as well. From a nuclear perspective, we've relied on it as a key element of our baseload generation for a long time, and it is certainly going to continue to do that as we think about our load portfolio growing with AI demand. We're expecting to be at 3 to 4% annual growth by the end of this decade, and nuclear will be a big part of how we make that happen.
Thank you, Katie. And for those who may be tuning in online and perhaps not as aware in the United States of what your service area looks like, can you just give us some broad framing?
Yes, thank you. And I'm coming off of, we just had a very exciting discussion next door on AI and generation. So. So from a service territory, we operate in 7 states. We have generation, we're a fully vertically integrated utility. We've got generation, transmission, and distribution. And we also have a gas local distribution company. The territories we operate, we've got parts of Florida, we've got North Carolina, South Carolina, Ohio, Indiana, Kentucky, and then our Tennessee, we recently announced a sale of our Tennessee gas business. So we have a diverse set of jurisdictions we serve. We have a diverse set of regulatory constructs that we work through. And so we're excited to have the opportunity to serve the load in all of those areas.
Oh, thanks, Katie. I'm glad your mind was buzzing from the AI discussion, and it's certainly relevant to that 3 to 4% demand growth that you talked about. Seth, I'd like to turn to you to tell us a little bit about Lightbridge, but with a focus on what is the role of advanced fuels in the nuclear energy innovation ecosystem when we're thinking about building reactors.
Well, at Lightbridge, we're developing fuels for the existing reactors and for small modular reactors. The fuels will be very different than the current fuels in that they'll use what's called high assay low enriched uranium, a higher enrichment, and in a metallic form. And these fuels will bring about a power increase from the existing reactors as well as from new reactors, as well as other benefits. And just the ability to bring more power is what the utilities we're working with are focusing on, getting more power from the existing reactors, from new reactors that they build. And these are advanced fuels for existing reactors. All of the advanced reactors being designed are having their own new kinds of tweaks to some previous ideas, be they pebble bed or molten salt or different types of reactors needing different kinds of fuels that are going forward. And since the president signed the executive orders 4 months ago, things are really moving fast for a lot of us. And with hats off to Brian and his colleagues at Idaho National Laboratory, in these last 4 months since the president signed the executive orders, we've received physical, highly enriched uranium, HEU, from the Department of Energy stockpiles, which very few companies have ever received. We, working with Idaho National Lab, produced samples of fuel. Those were qualified with Idaho National Laboratory. The experiment was approved to go into the advanced test reactor at Idaho National Laboratory, which I believe is the world's largest test reactor, using something called INL invented called FAST, Fission Accelerated Steady State Testing, which using the highly enriched uranium with more neutrons just speeds up the testing. And we were supposed to go into the reactor in the spring, but it looks like that's being expedited to November. And that's all in the last 4 months. Things aren't supposed to move that fast in the nuclear industry, but now in the advanced space and at Idaho National Lab, they are.
And they're moving fast together, it sounds like. Great plug for Brian later in the session. Rob, so let's broaden the aperture out to include Europe. Tell us about SGE's drive to deploy nuclear reactors there, and what is the role of international civil nuclear cooperation in deploying new reactors?
Yeah, thanks. And thank you for having us. This is like truly a star-studded event of who's who in nuclear energy. So, I think we're offering a solution, hopefully, to the problem that we're all here to discuss this week, which is how do we really get this to scale? So we're a fleet developer in Europe. We're headquartered in Poland, but we're working across the continent, specifically with BWRX-300 SMRs from GE Vernova Hitachi, to bring that technology to scale to Europe. Based in Poland, as I said, we're looking at what we've so far received from the Polish government is permission to build 24 units in Poland. So the concept behind our company is to do these projects commercially, finance them commercially, run a lean commercial deployment process that will make this economical to get to the scale that we need. And to do that, we really need to be thinking in dozens of reactors. And that's kind of the ethos of our entire fleet approach. The additional advantage is working across Europe, you have a lot of small countries that might not on their own be a market for a fleet. And so by partnering with local partners, local utilities, local constructors in the region, we bring that fleet efficiency to a country that may only need a couple of units on their own.
Well, it's fantastic, and I'm glad I added that mention of at scale before turning to you, because you clearly illuminated why that was important. Brian, let's talk a little bit about the role of Idaho National Laboratory, and I know that's certainly your purview, but I want to include the other DOE national laboratories too in advancing reactor deployment. And I know there are so many activities underway regarding new builds at the NRIC Dome, which I'm certain you'll tell us about.
Yeah, sure. Happy to be here, and I speak at a lot of non-nuclear events. And where I'm the one-eyed man in the land of the blind, right? And here in this room, at this event, with this panel, everything I say has to be verifiably true. And so I'll ensure that is the case. I'm from Idaho National Lab, but for perspective, I'm a longtime career Fed. I bookended my federal career with the Department of Energy, where I also spent time in the Naval Nuclear Propulsion Program, the Nuclear Navy, along with National Nuclear Security Administration, and even some time in the House of Representatives as a staff member in the Appropriations Committee. And so I kind of bring that purview to this conversation and my work today with Idaho National Lab. And I'm glad you mentioned the entire National Lab network. I think it's important to remember, even though Idaho National Lab is the U.S. government's lead laboratory for nuclear energy research, development, demonstration, there is a network of 17 labs, virtually all of which have some role to play in the exciting things that we're talking about. But Idaho National Lab being the lead lab for nuclear, you're exactly right. There is just an absolute ton going on. There was seems like every week there's more than an absolute ton going on. We're just adding to what we're working on. It is very exciting. We've got the DOME testbed that you mentioned, the demonstration of microreactor experiments, DOME. That test bed allows private vendors to come in and turn on their reactor experiments. The first two companies that are going to demonstrate their reactor experiments were recently announced by INL and the Department of Energy. Westinghouse and Radiant are going to put their microreactor experiments in there. And that's exciting, right? Because if you're Westinghouse or Radiant, maybe you don't have the unique facilities that you need to put your reactor experiment in, turn it on, bring it critical, and get just massive amounts of test data. Good news, we have that at the Idaho National Lab. And that's one of those things that we can offer to help de-risk these programs. We've talked a lot in the session today about opportunities and challenges to getting to scalability, commercial deployments at scale, and de-risking various aspects of the programs, including on the technological side. That is something that Idaho National Lab can bring to bear. Seth had mentioned the advanced test reactor, where it's the most unique test reactor in the world, frankly, and so we can do a lot of just whiz-bang things in that facility to de-risk programs and accelerate the technology development programs. And then we're also citing pilot reactor projects. So even if they're not experiments, but Oklo was mentioned earlier today. Oklo just did their groundbreaking yesterday at Idaho National Lab to cite their pilot reactor at Idaho National Lab. So we may talk a little bit more about the AI and data center boom and how that aligns with nuclear, but making federal lands, including at Idaho National Lab, available for developers is a big part of our efforts in this space.
Oh, thank you for that fantastic overview. And I wonder if I might just ask a quick follow-up question on the dome and sort of the symbolic power behind it being repurposed in the same way that we have reactors being repowered. Can you talk about what that building used to house and why it's wonderful that it's being used to de-risk these new technologies?
Sure, no, that's a great question, and I'll even give you a little tidbit of trivia about DOME, which I find fascinating in the kind of the arc of nuclear history in this country. So the DOME is the old containment building for the experimental breeder reactor, EBR-2. That was a reactor that ran at INL for decades. Proved a lot of principles. It was part of that underpinning research and development that Idaho National Lab has done for decades out there in southeast Idaho. Not only beginning with powering 4 light bulbs, with the original EBR reactor. EBR-2 kind of stands there as a testament to this nation's commitment to kind of honing the steel, being a leader in nuclear technologies around the world. But one thing I find interesting about EBR-2, just as kind of a footnote in history, we talked today about all of these advancements in advanced reactors, inherent safety features, passive safety features, in some cases kind of designed into the physics of the reactor. And in the EBR-2 reactor, when it was still operating in April of 1986, it was early April 1986, we were running a series of experiments, but over the course of April 3rd into April 4th, we did a couple of experiments that it certainly can make engineers and physicists excited, right? It's maybe to the average person, it's not so exciting. But one thing that we did was we ran the reactor at full power and turned off the pumps running the coolant through the reactor. We thought that the reactor would just shut itself down, right? This is a concept we talk about today as newfangled technology, walk-away safe reactors. That's a principle we were proving the night of April 3rd, 1986. Indeed, the reactor shut itself down, just as predicted. We ran another experiment right after that where we essentially closed the heat sink for the reactor, expecting that the physics of the reactor, indeed, heat would rise and then the fission reaction would stop, and indeed, that's what happened. This all happened in early April 1986. You might not have heard about it, you might not have read about it, because guess what happened in late April of 1986? Right? In this room, we all know Chernobyl happened in late April 1986. So it is very interesting that while we in the US were demonstrating the inherent safety of some advanced reactor designs, certainly at that time, something else that happened on the world stage came about and overtook the conversation. So that is just again, an interesting footnote in history, but I love the fact that we're able to repurpose that containment structure and make it available as a test bed for these advanced reactor concepts.
Yeah, well, what a fantastic historic anecdote that is still, just so prevalent today, and I think underpins your earlier comment about that network of national labs that is undertaking, work similarly supporting these deployments. So let's turn to talking about strengthening the fuel supply chain, the second piece of the puzzle. Katie, I'd like to come back to you and talk about how Duke Energy is thinking about fuel availability and security of supply. And Seth talked about how they're supporting the existing fleet and the new reactors. So please feel free to focus on either your existing, on both or
Sure. So it's always been best practice for us to make sure we've got line of sight for a very long time for our fuel supply. Certainly changed over the last 5 years in terms of where we source our fuel supply. So that's been the focus for us, is making sure we've got line of sight to a diverse set of fuel supplies, and as much as we can look domestically or close to home, really focusing there and leveraging all the different fuel sources we do need. So that continues to be priority, just in balancing the risk of making sure we've got access. 11 gigawatts, we need that access and we need that visibility for the long term. And so that's really where we are today. And then, of course, as we look forward, we keep that front of mind in terms of technology, where we land in terms of what technology plays the central role in our future portfolio, and making sure that that's a supply that we know will be accessible, affordable. Big piece of our value proposition is making sure our customers have the most affordable power. So all of those things factor into how we think about it.
Yeah, thank you so much, Katie. Seth, so can you make Katie affordable fuel? No, I'm kidding. Can you tell us more about Lightbridge's efforts to strengthen the fuel supply chain? I know you touched on it a little bit there in the beginning. But
yeah, and Duke is a utility that's advised us, and we're very grateful to that, and making sure our fuel can head toward those reactors, we hope. And so, when we talk about what's called the front end of the fuel cycle, uranium mining, conversion, enrichment, fabrication, that are all needed if we're going to have nuclear power. And if we talk about tripling nuclear globally by 2050 and quadrupling it within the United States, these are good areas for your kids to go into if they're looking for jobs that won't be replaced by AI, that will be growth areas. And at Lightbridge, we're sort of in a space between the third and fourth step, between the enrichment and the fuel fabrication and fuel design for more advanced fuels. And then together, and we expect with partners on fabrication for the reactors. Right now we're fabricating at Idaho National Laboratory, and we're outgrowing that, and we're doing front-end engineering and design studies looking at where we'll build our pilot scale facility to fabricate fuel that can be expandable over time, perhaps, or a separate commercial scale facility. And the main activity we're involved with there is going to be deploying this facility. But we think that by doing so and by deploying new fuels that will pull through the supply chains, the mining, the conversion, the enrichment, and in our case, higher levels of enrichment. And we think that in a world where data centers and others need constant power from nuclear, this is going to be something that you're going to see more and more response to from the market, such as I used to think the utilities were the big dogs, no offense, that they kind of made all the decisions and pulled through the supply chains. But now we'll see something like Constellation reopening 3 Mile Island Unit 1 as the Clean Energy Center because of the Microsoft power purchase agreement, something Constellation never would have done on its own. And we're starting to have some conversations directly to hyperscalers and others that on their own will then pull through utilities and down through the supply chains.
Thank you, Seth, for that fantastic overview, and then also differentiating between the different parts of the fuel cycle. We certainly don't have time to really explore that further, but so appreciate it. Rob, I'd like to ask you to tell us about how SGE will envisions utilizing the existing fuel supply chain, and I can't help but mention Katie talking about risk again, and like what the imperatives that are driving SGE's decision making in this space.
Yeah, so we're using the BWRX 300 reactor from GE Vernova Hitachi, and we're co-invested in that with OPG and TVA into the standard design itself. And the X is 10th of a kind. So this is a well understood boiling water reactor that is in commercial operation all around the world. And that was really important to us, not to disparage some of the Gen 4 designs that are fantastic that are coming out, but we need power now. Poland in 2025 is going to have a generation gap that will grow every year well into the middle of the decade. By 2040, we're looking towards 19 gigawatts. I said 19 gigawatts in a generation gap. For, by US standards, a relatively small country. So we need reactors that we can build now, and we need reactors that we can fuel now. So there is an existing fuel supply chain for BWRs in Europe. The fuel is already fabricated in Europe. It is already certified by European regulators. So that's just another way that we get to market and we get to scale quicker. Poland is the only country from the kind of the former Warsaw Pact region that did not leave the communist period with an existing civil nuclear program. So in all our neighbors, and those are countries we're working in as well, but those countries, a lot of them have legacy Soviet era nuclear power plants that we're looking to plan for the replacement and retirement of, along with the huge amount of coal that is coming offline in Europe. But in Poland, we don't have that legacy nuclear power. So we do have to work incredibly urgently.
And I think, as a legacy of how the fuel supply chain evolved and, dominance of certain players in that supply chain, I think it speaks to what Katie earlier, inferred about the pivot toward different suppliers and having to rebuild some of that after Russia invaded Ukraine. And I think that emphasis on the power gap that you're anticipating if you don't do something underscores the importance of energy security.
And to be fair, even if we do something,
right, still,
we're not solving for the power gap. We're mitigating for the power gap.
Yeah, that's really important. Brian, I'd like to come back to you and tell us about how INL is engaged on fuel supply efforts. I know Seth talked about it a little bit in his opening.
Yeah, and you're exactly right. I mean, they're going back to the unique capabilities, the unique skill sets among our workforce at Idaho National Lab. We bring to bear what I would say is kind of the bread and butter, the core of what we do and what we've always done is provide underpinning research to support nuclear technology development and deployment. So we continue doing that, certainly, hot cells and glove boxes, modeling and simulation capabilities that are always getting better. Certainly those are far better than they were, say, in the 70s or 80s. And so, we continue, we remain at the leading edge of technology development that can assist in our fuel development, fuel qualification programs. Every one of those vendors out there that wants to be successful is going to have a qualified fuel form, right? And Idaho National National Laboratory isn't necessarily the only stop that you have to make, but at some point along the way, all of those vendors are stopping at Idaho National Laboratory, not just to work with our scientists and engineers on their reactor design, but on the fuel that's going to go in it, because without the fuel, you're just going to have a pretty machine sitting off to the side. So there's that aspect. We are, in addition to, I noted some reactor vendors that are citing their pilot reactor projects at Idaho National Laboratory, leveraging the federal land, leveraging Department of Energy regulatory authorities that can perhaps kind of streamline that deployment process and then help establish synergy when they pivot into an NRC license. That exists on fuel development work as well, with some fuel developers that want to site their fuel fabrication lines, for example, at INL. Again, using those federal lands, using Department of Energy regulatory authorities, and kind of moving quickly so that they can then parlay that into a commercial deployment. So, lots of activity on that front. And then I just say, again, maybe stepping back for a moment and thinking of it from the across the arc of my career. I was working in the House Appropriations Committee when Department of Energy was sort of coming up with the plan for how to establish and increase domestic enrichment capability here in the U.S. And we kind of decided that would be in the form of offtake agreements and sort of settled on a number. Today, there's $3.4 billion that Congress has appropriated for the DOE to go out and essentially, in some ways, in some pockets, create a domestic capability. And there's a lot of work still to be done at DOE. It's an exciting place to be for a lot of reasons, not least of which is the fuels area. And putting that $3.4 billion to use to stand up these production lines, these enrichment lines, that's going to remain very, very important. So INL has a role to play in that, but that is an all-of-government effort.
Yeah. And thank you for surveying some of those capabilities. I was very fortunate to actually tour one of the new hot cells out at Idaho National Labs earlier this year. And I think it is important what you emphasized, that the developers and some of the data for the fuel qualification can happen there instead of some of these developers trying to build. I mean, it would be cost prohibitive to build a hot cell to that standard on their own. So
thank you for saying that, because you hit on really kind of what, as a taxpayer in this country, we should all be proud of that national laboratory system, right? I mentioned 17 national labs. Those are DOE-owned laboratories, and therefore they're taxpayer funded. And those very unique capabilities that exist across all 17 labs, we should be very proud of that here in America.
Yeah. Well, in our remaining time together, I'd like to pivot to talking about something we've heard run throughout the conversations and panels today, building the workforce and fostering a talent pipeline. I heard Alicia Duncan's call earlier, about all the salt and pepper and some of the people's hair on stage. I have a little myself, but let's talk through how we're attracting new talent and how we're also ensuring that those who do have salt and pepper in their hair are able to translate lessons learned and institutional knowledge down to this younger generation. Katie, as we approach this frontier of nuclear energy innovation, can you give us a sense of how Duke Energy is investing in cultivating talent?
Sure, and the stat that I heard, and I believe it's correct, is by 2050, I think the estimate is 375,000 employees that'll be needed to support small modular. I think that comes from the DOE. So very much front of mind in terms of not only do we need to be prepared to build new generation, support the fleet we have today, but then also transition to a workforce that can run the machines, right? And so when I think about that, I don't think it's we think of it not as a Duke Energy, but as a collective problem to solve. And so we've been leveraging, actually, I know INL is doing quite a lot on that, and so really appreciate the work that's happening there. And from the DOE perspective, looking at the skills we need, not only for the current operations, but also the construction, and then ultimately the next workforce. So I think it's a collaborative effort. I think we understand the skill sets that are needed, and working through collaborations with universities, with DOE, with laboratories, with each other is imperative in order to solve this 375,000 person issue. And so that's how we're looking at it. It's a collective effort.
Yeah. I like that emphasis on collective and working together to really try and plan as much as possible without overskilling or upskilling too many people in a specific field. And I wonder too, are you seeing a demand for technical and non-technical roles at Duke?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think broadly, yes. I think it's a step change that we're going to have to, that we're solving for, not going to have to. The other thing I'd say is transferability. There are skill sets that are transferable, easy for me to say, between different parts of our generation fleet. So where we can identify that, let's do it and make sure we're building not only specific, but also building across. And so I think that's the approach we're looking at.
Yeah. What a great way to also retain then that corporate culture
That's
and
right.
your institutional knowledge too.
That's right.
Yeah. Thank you, Katie.
Yep.
Seth, I'm hearing about ample employment opportunities across the nuclear supply chain. I've been in states like Kentucky and other places. It seems like there's an existing shortfall now. Can you give us a sense of the scale and the scope of the need that you're hearing and how you're thinking about this issue?
Well, the president of the American Nuclear Society, Hash Hashemian, is here today. And the American Nuclear Society recently put out some new data about its total membership. And for the first time in many decades, there are more members of the American Nuclear Society under age 35 than there are over age 65. And and what's interesting in the spread of it is how, it is sort of pushing more toward over 65 and under 35. So you have a skills transfer from people nearing retirement to people early in careers. And what's happening at Lightbridge, I think, is a microcosm of this, where we're hiring now, we're hiring new engineers, we're going to keep hiring new engineers for some time, we expect, and we're having more senior, experienced people nearing retirement, trying rapidly to transfer skills to younger people. I know some industries have hollowed out management. This sort of happened by itself in nuclear with the people in the middle kind of going away, and it's a difficult thing also when you talk about new technologies, where you have people getting excited by working on things that are new, that can be well placed in the market, but are entrepreneurial, that are risky in some ways. And there's a lot of projects, and what some of us are starting to do is collaborate, like Lightbridge and Oklo are looking at ways to work together. Our engineers really got to know each other side by side at Idaho National Laboratory. We both benefited from DOE support, and we're looking at potentially co-locating our commercial nuclear fuel fabrication facilities and having some personnel in common and some training that could go with that. I think through these steps I mentioned earlier of uranium mining and conversion and enrichment and fuel fabrication, as we step up, it's going to be tremendous opportunities. There are friends in Canada. Tim Gitzel is here, the CEO of Cameco today. Mines a lot of the uranium used in the United States. The United States mines 5% of its own uranium and has a goal to increase that. So there's a lot of upside there that will include a lot of personnel and each of these steps. So I think the opportunities are tremendous, and I think that, I'll just say one last shout out for INL. I know that the people working there on the Lightbridge project are just so excited, and in other projects too, like Oklo, where they're physically making things that are physically being demonstrated. This is really transitioning to a very exciting time to work on things.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Seth. And I think it's important that you illuminated there's an existing bottleneck now, and need for those who have been technically trained, and there's certainly long lead times for workforce development. So, you know, it's great that, again, to Katie's point, we're gonna keep collaborating and trying to assess what the balance of those 375,000 and change, perhaps more, if we aim toward, you know, further increasing beyond the tripling of nuclear to quadrupling would be great. Rob, can you talk to us about how SGE is thinking about fostering its future workforce in Europe? Because you're talking about fleet-wide deployment at scale. Yep. That's a wonderful ambition that will require many people.
Yeah, absolutely. And it is a little different in Europe. You know, we do get strong participation from a large number of the governments. There's a lot of trained workforce or similarly trained workforce in existence, one from the existing reactor fleet that can migrate technologies, but also other specialized folks from inside and outside the power sector that can be upskilled, so to speak, to learn some of the very specific skills in a family of knowledge they're already doing. You know, we talk about this all the time. Marine welders can become nuclear welders, things like that. So, you know, we do get great participation from governments across the region in coordinating with their universities and their technical schools to help deploy these programs. That's very important. I think, you know, as we look at large and small new build across the region, a lot of that workforce is going to be the same workforce. One thing that we're looking at in our fleet approach, we're always want local leadership, local partners, but certain aspects of the workforce are certainly going to be standardized. So, you know, whether it's a Bulgarian company working on a Polish project or a Polish company working on a Czech project or so on, those highly specialized folks have great opportunity to go across the region and do some work that's going to be incredibly efficient. And then the other thing is a commercial project, we have to think about how to just do this work more efficiently. And everybody likes to wave the hand and say AI, and then not really know what that means, right? 5 years ago, everybody said blockchain, and then that made things better. It doesn't matter. No one does. It may not even be real. But yeah. So we've moved past that phase of just saying AI, and we're starting to really look in detail where automation, where artificial intelligence can help make things work smarter. And you know, we're not going to eliminate entire chunks of the workforce, but if we can have one person with a human in the loop, so to speak, doing the work of 6 or 7 people, if we can get some of the paper moving out of the process and digitize it and automate it, that's how that is going to reduce the workforce, but that is also going to reduce the cost of these reactors and the time it takes to build these reactors. And that's how we get to projects that are actually commercially solvent and provide electricity at an affordable price.
Great point, thank you. And I wasn't aware of those sort of the efficiencies that you're looking for in those teams that you can then move from one country to the next, and that at scale.
I mean, every aspect has to be analyzed individually, and there's places where it makes sense, and there's places where it doesn't. But these are the types of details that we're thinking through when we look at how to deliver these projects as quickly and as economically as possible.
Wonderful. Brian, can you talk to us about how you're thinking through workforce development and how INL might be engaged in this area?
Yeah, sure. And these have been, you know, just great comments. And not surprisingly, I think there's just a lot of synergy on the way that, you know, that we think about it in the National Laboratory System and in partnership with the Department of Energy. And I guess one thing I'd say, first of all, you know, Idaho National Lab is I think quite good at leaning in on the university partnerships. We've got both regional consortia, we've got engagements with, directly with universities all around the country. A lot of that has to do with, we may do joint appointments, right, where we'll bring a university researcher out to the lab or vice versa. We'll help with curriculum design, that kind of thing. There is a lot of cross-pollination, not surprisingly, because of the missions between universities and the national labs, including INL. And that's important. We need to continue that, and we need to do more of that. And we do also, we've got K through 12 programs, we do high school internships at INL and the other labs. That's good at kind of capturing folks at every stage. And I know a lot of that is kind of geared toward the, hey, you know, we need to grow the STEM, students in the pipeline. And that's important, but I also come back to, for a moment, I go back to my nuclear Navy days. Right, you can have the best designed submarine, on the board and in the computer, but if you don't have people bending the metal and welding it together, you don't have a submarine. You just have a really good design that a bunch of engineers are high-fiving over, right? So, we've wrestled with this in the Navy across the shipbuilding operations, but certainly in the nuclear shipbuilding operations, and we've tried to get at that because we need to increase our production of ships coming out of the shipyards. And we tried to inspire those craft trades, that skilled labor, to go out to the shipyard and support the national defense by going and learning a craft at the shipyard. The commercial that you might see during the Super Bowl, it says "Build submarines." Right, that came out of those efforts when we said we need more shipyard workers. That's very, very important. So I look at it across a spectrum. Yes, we need to bolster our STEM education programs. And yes, I want to inspire people to do big things, including going and building nuclear. But I also recognize that to the extent that we've talked today about putting the Vogtle 3 and 4 workforce to work on the next project, we've also talked about a tripling of nuclear in this, tripling or quadrupling of nuclear in this country. That essentially means what? The Vogtle workforce times 10, at any given time. So we need a lot more folks to get excited about nuclear and excited to go off and build nuclear while we continue to bolster, those that are coming up through the academic programs in the universities. So yeah, I think it's kind of an all of the above. And I guess my last comment on that, I would just say, I know Amy Roma is here participating in the series today. She's fun. I mean, she's just, for those, you all know her, she's brilliant, right? She bills herself as a nuclear lawyer, and she is, right? She's a lawyer, and she's one of the most influential people in this space out there. She's brilliant, and we need her, and she's a lawyer. Right, so would our STEM education efforts have inspired Amy Roma to, right? But we need people like Amy Roma, Flory Knopf at Department of Energy, another lawyer, but she's the Deputy Assistant Secretary in the fuels area at the Department of Energy, doing big things. And so, this problem of scalability, I think of it, there's the technical piece of it. We need to get that right. But it's MBAs and lawyers that are going to figure out the right economic conditions that need to come together. The panel before us spoke on that and spoke quite well about it. And they weren't tackling engineering problems. They were tackling the financeability. And I think that's key. So let's look at it as an all of the above approach and inspire an entire generation of Americans to go off and make this a reality.
Yeah, hear to that. I mean, there's certainly a place, I think, in this nuclear energy ecosystem for everyone as a social science major, myself. And, we need the MBAs, the lawyers, the tradespeople, it's just the list goes on. And so, and I think in the time that we've already spent talking, we've built an incredible scaffolding together, kind of outlining these three different elements of the ecosystem. I wish we had more time to do so, but I would love to turn to all of you and ask, in closing, what would you like the audience to really come away from this discussion and your respective efforts, and what are the what is the step you would think is to ensure delivery of nuclear energy ambitions? Katie, may I start with you?
Sure. I think what I'm most excited about is the excitement of what we're doing, right? And the excitement of the role that nuclear is playing today, but then the role it's going to play tomorrow. So I think maybe it's the ask around the collective working together to make that happen. I think that excitement is here, very prevalent in this room, and just continuing to build that excitement and work together like we do to make it happen.
Great.
Yeah, I think that excitement is very important as people are working on projects that they'll see come to fruition. I think that it's very important for people entering the field to know that there's a long career path ahead of them. And this tremendous power demand from data centers with AI and for other reasons has really convinced a lot of people that this is not going to peter out. This is excitement that's going to continue for a long time for industries that are going to need the power.
So I want to tie in a little bit from the last panel and this panel. And I think one thing that I'd ask people to think about is how do we address this gap between getting the first couple of projects going and getting into dozens of projects going at a time? Because as we talk about the Vogtle 3 and 4 workforce, where are they working today? Not on Vogtle 5, not on an AP 1000. So, you know, in the last panel, we heard a little bit about how we're going to build a couple, and then when they're up and running and we know what it takes to build them, then we're going to use project finance and we're going to go to scale. There's a gap there. So as we're lining up this workforce, as we're lining up this supply chain, we can't stop for a few years and make sure it's all good and then start again. We've got to keep the flow going. And that's what I'd really like people to focus on this week.
That really resonates with me. I learned from some of our state-based work in West Virginia, the affiliated construction trades had over 7,000 of their members working on the AP 1000 projects. And there wasn't an order book to follow, and they have not waited around to find out if there will be another. So several thousands of those have moved on. So just really.
And it's not a criticism. I wish there was another AP 1000 under construction right now. There should be.
Yeah. Wonderful. Thank you, Brian.
I guess maybe I'd say, because I don't know how to follow, those are just wonderful statements from my fellow panelists. Let me turn just for a moment back into my nuclear Navy background and training. And this kind of plays into the role of the financing. Levelized cost of electricity, LCOE. One thing maybe I'd like folks to take away is if I think about nuclear energy for many, many attributes that go well beyond just the dollars and cents. And let's just, I like to say this, if it were all about LCOE in the nuclear Navy, we would have a fleet of diesel-powered submarines. You as a taxpayer would demand diesel-powered submarines because that's the cheapest way to build and deploy a submarine. We don't, and we as Americans are very proud of our nuclear-powered submarine fleet. It achieves unmatched dominance against our adversaries in the undersea domain. We are very proud of it, and we as Americans, as taxpayers, accept that that does come with a higher design and build cost, but what we achieve with that is unmatched. I see that dynamic within the commercial nuclear sphere, and I'm continuing to look at ways that we can get past looking only at LCOE as we consider advanced nuclear deployments, because it really isn't just about what the lowest cost energy is. It's about what is best suited for American energy dominance and resilience. And so that's maybe what I'd like to leave folks with here today.
How do I follow that? No, I really wish that we had more time together today to explore all of these themes. I just so appreciate all of you being here and being on this panel to talk about them together. Please join me in thanking our panelists for all of their time and insights.
And thank you so much to Lauren for so expertly moderating this panel. And now I'm delighted to invite everyone to please join us for a brief coffee break. And please return at 3 o'clock when our program will resume again. Thank you.